Good evening, one and all. Different glasses, different hat, same old nonsense. I've been sat here for 12 hours today, so if I start to nod off, please forgive me. I'm going to say a very quick hello to a few people. I tell you what, let me just put a banner across the bottom of the screen because you do need to know that. Let's have a look. First off the mark this evening was our friend Gary Muirhead. Good evening, Gary. Good of you to join us. And Ken Hatter is here, and as he rightly points out, it's not dark. Give it another couple of weeks, Ken, and by the time these evening shows roll around, it'll be plenty dark enough. For those of you that weren't here for our pilot episode of the BROKK Show After Dark 2 weeks ago, this is unscripted, entirely unscripted. There is no video generally, although we are about to do something different with that. The conversation will be led entirely by your good selves. Now, I'm just seeing a few other people arriving here. Gary Muirhead has already entered our competition. Good evening to Mick Norton as well. Many thanks indeed for joining us, Mick. We're going to get to your point in just a second. Justin Carrigan can always be relied upon to turn up whenever there's a prize to be had, and I expect to see him entering our BROKK competition just a second. These are the suggested topics for conversation this evening. Is it still possible to be a demolition or construction entrepreneur in the modern age? Is legislation and regulation standing in the way of business development? What is the point of attracting young people to the industry when we are simultaneously forcing people out through the exit? And we're going to start by talking about a subject that is very close to my heart. It's also close to the heart of our friend Mick Norton. There's been a lot of talk online recently about electric machines and all that good stuff. But we decided we would do a little bit more. Now, as I said, we don't normally run videos on this show, although we are only 2 shows in, so we can make up the rules as we go along. But I thought I'd play you this. While you're thinking about all those other topics for conversation, I thought I'd play you this. There has been a lot of talk and debate online recently about electrically powered construction equipment. While equipment manufacturers are keen to convince us all that electric power is a solution to at least some of our environmental challenges, others, potential customers included, still have questions about things like expected battery life, charging times, and the amount of work that can be carried out on a single charge. But perhaps the biggest question that still hangs over electric machines is their likely resale value. With equipment manufacturers either unable or unwilling to help answer that most pressing question, we reached out to auction house Ritchie Brothers to find out what they were seeing in terms of electric machine sales.
Electrical equipment is such a new equipment, and Ritchie Brothers mainly deals with used equipment. Hence, it needs to go a couple of years before we actually see that through our systems in the normal case. So what we've been now we've been observing the market as a full. We're looking at new sales and starting to prepare where we see new sales are high. So we are ready in those regions.
So that kind of answers my second question, which was going to be: have you seen a good demand for electric machines? I guess it's still too early. I've been trying to remember. I think we've had electric machines around for what, 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, it depends on we need to differentiate a bit. Electric machinery is quite common. We've been using it for 100 years almost, especially in mines. But then it has been cable-driven machines. So that's the first real electrical equipment still available. And what's happening now is that we transition from cable-driven machines into different or other versions, like hybrid versions with a cable and a battery, or pure battery, or battery hydrogen, or diesel cable, and all these hybrids that's coming into the market.
One of my other questions was going to be, are customers seeking assurance on battery condition? Obviously, that's another new question. If you haven't been selling any electrically powered construction equipment as yet, it's probably too early to ask. But at the same time, I mean, you've mentioned mining equipment. I guess you've had a fair few electric forklifts go across the weighbridge over the years as well.
Yeah, the thing is with forklifts, they use a totally different battery type than what we see in the modern light construction equipment, excavators, loaders, and so on. Because forklifts still depend heavily on having a good counterweight, most of them, or the weight is usually not an issue, even though the counterweight might not be needed in this. I don't know the English word for it, but you have this counterweight forklift, and then you have warehouse forklifts where you usually have support legs on them. but still weight is not an issue. And then you go for the cheapest battery normally, which is still lead acid batteries, and that is the main battery types in the material handling sectors. There are cases where we see lithium batteries in that sector as well, but then it's because you need the possibility to do a quick charge, which lead acid doesn't.
It's very clear. I think this is one of those questions that I'm probably about 2 years too early to actually be asking. But it really is responding to a genuine request. We've had, funnily enough, we've had a discussion on the show this morning about that very thing, about we have one of our audience has been reaching out to various equipment manufacturers, including Hitachi and JCB, asking about potential resale values and battery life and all that kind of thing. And they're not, that they either can't or they won't give him an answer at the moment. And maybe it is as simple as they actually don't have an answer yet.
Yeah, we actually did a huge effort in the beginning of this year. Me and my team here, we reached out to all our good contacts in the construction business to get our heads around this new equipment type when it comes to battery electric. If we talk about just battery electric, which is the main subject, and had a thorough discussion. I think we talked with at least 10 importers or OEMs of this. We also talked to some battery producers and so on to compile a good report that we then sell to finance customers and other interested in the subject. And if we talk about battery life, we can look a bit on batteries for electric buses. It's still not the same chemistry as the ones that are in electric construction machines, but they hold some of the same properties. And so far, we've seen that 8 years has not been a great issue for these batteries. But most manufacturers say that you will see a battery replacement somewhere around year 8 to 10. That's the consensus we've seen so far.
And year 8 to 10, I mean, certainly here in the UK, we are a very rental-driven sector. 8 to 10 years is at least, well, it's probably 2 working lives. I would imagine most of these machines would have been through the fleet and put back out again after about 4 or 5 years, if not even less than that. Yeah,
so for the first owner, I guess that won't be much of an issue. But also when you consider the life of diesel machines today, it's heavily regulated due to exhaust requirements, Euro zones for engines and so on. That won't be for electric machines because they don't have any pollution, so they are unaffected by these regulations. Also, technically, it's, if you look at the chassis, don't talk about the battery, but if you look at the chassis and the functions within the chassis, electric machines are actually quite a lot simpler than the diesel version. So all of this speaks for that the electric machines will actually be able to be in life for a longer time than a diesel version. In a diesel excavator, you have a diesel engine, which is quite complicated. That powers a hydraulic pump, which powers then all the rest of the machinery inside the excavator, tracks, digging, cylinders, and so on. When you do it in a battery electric, you actually have a electrical engine powering the same pump, which is a lot simpler than a diesel engine. And then you usually exchange the counterweight to the battery. So the machine itself becomes quite simple. And we also seen some examples. Volvo did a test a couple of years ago with a fluid-free excavator where you replaced all the hydraulics with mini electrical servos instead to handle all of this. That hasn't gone into production, but there are takes on this that might cause the electrical machines to be simpler and longer living.
So there you are. There is the Ritchie brothers' take on all of the good things about electric machines. I'm just going to remind everyone, excuse me, we do have this competition running, and for some reason the system that we use to log those entries has just gone slightly squiffy. I know for a fact there's been a good many more than this, but the system is only showing 5 entries so far. So if you would be kind enough to re-enter the word BROKK, BROKK, into the chat for your chance to win. I've got a bag of goodies here that we'll be dispatching probably tomorrow if we've got your address in time, and get that out to you. So those are the other topics of conversation. Is it possible to be a demolition construction entrepreneur in the modern age? Is legislation and regulation stand in the way of business development? What is the point of attracting young people to the industry when we are simultaneously forcing experienced workers out through the exit? And as you have just seen, we are talking electric machines as well. Had a few comments on all things electric. Thank you very much indeed for everybody that's just jumped back in and re-entered there. And there is a very good point. We've not got enough power in the UK in winter. They're getting coal power stations ready for the winter. I wasn't aware of that, but it wouldn't surprise me. I think JCB got the idea. Hydrogen power. Well, we do seem to be heading for a bit of duality within the industry. I think we've all agreed by now that at the lower end, it will be electric, and at the top end, or the middle end, I should say, if you can have a middle end, it will be hydrogen, and then going right up to the very, very top, it might be electric again when we're talking about some of the mining machines, as our friend Johan from Ritchie Brothers has just said. Let's have a look. I was surprised to see the year 8 to 10 forecast. Good feedback on Ritchie Brothers overview. Yeah, and I actually picked up on that when we were speaking. I had a chat with Johan off air. And given that information that he was pulling together was actually for finance companies who obviously are, they want transparency, they want verified information, but also they are in the process, or they will be in the business of actually loaning people money based upon the life expectancy of both machine and battery. I do think that is worthy of consideration. I also picked up on his point about the simplicity of those machines as well. And I realise that there will be some that will be looking at possible job losses in the areas of mechanics and fitters and that kind of thing. But those machines are, in addition to being largely silent, in addition to being emissions free, they are largely, and I do mean largely, maintenance free as well. It's an interesting point. The one thing that has come out of it, two things really have come out of it based on my discussions today with Ritchie Brothers. It's still too early to tell. And is it too early to tell because the take up in the market has not been as good as we might have been led to believe? I know that some of the major plant hirers, the Sunbelts and the Flannerys and the Lynches, I believe all of those have got electric machines in their fleet. But it'd be interesting if anybody knows the actual breakdown of what percentage of their machines are now electric. My guess is it will be very, very small indeed. Gary Muirhead, my neighbour works for Volvo Cars, and he brought home an all-electric V40 car, and it cost 90,000 quid plus. And he told me it's too expensive to buy, so Volvo are doing a car hire deal or leased option. And yes, I think we've already seen the fact that electric machines are more expensive. I don't think that's going to be